awaken your spirit. Chosen ones. When a chapter ends by force, it's because the universe got tired of waiting for you to close the door yourself. That's the moment you're in right now, standing at the edge of a life you'll never return to, even if you tried. Something in you has shifted so deeply, so permanently, that the very situations, people, and patterns that once held you hostage simply no longer recognize you. And before you think that sounds dramatic, here's a psychological fact. When a person reaches a certain threshold of self-awareness, their brain physically stops responding to familiar toxic cycles the same way. In other words, your mind upgraded and your old life got automatically logged out. This is why it feels strangely quiet right now. Not the creepy horror movie quiet, but the kind of quiet that appears after a storm when you step outside and realize your house is still standing. You don't fully trust it yet. You're checking the sky, checking the ground, checking your own pulse like, hold on, is the chaos really gone or is it just taking a lunch break? But no, this time it's done. Not paused, not simmering, not hiding behind your front door waiting to yell, surprise. Finished, complete, expired like milk left in the sun. And the best part? You didn't just crawl your way out of the madness. You walked out with receipts, clarity, and a newfound ability to spot nonsense the way airport dogs detect suspicious luggage. You've graduated from a version of yourself that tolerated what your soul was screaming against. You're not just free, you're finally aligned. So, as we dive into this message, understand this. You're not listening because you're broken. You're listening because you're being confirmed. Everything you went through wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And now that the preparation has served its purpose, congratulations, it's done. You will never have to go through that again. Number 1. You didn't just survive the storm. You outgrew the version of yourself that attracted it in the first place. There comes a moment in life when the chaos doesn't end, because the world suddenly became kind, but because you became someone the chaos could no longer latch onto. That's the shift this point is talking about. You didn't just hold on through difficult seasons. You quietly became a different person in the process. A stronger one, a less naive one, a more awake one. The storm didn't pass because it felt sorry for you. It passed because it literally couldn't keep up with who you've become. For a long time, the version of you that existed tolerated things you didn't even realize were hurting you. You let people drain you because you thought patience was a virtue. You let situations repeat because you believed endurance made you loyal. You kept forgiving because you confused compassion with self-sacrifice. You weren't weak. You were untrained in protecting your own peace. That version of you had gaps, soft spots, blind spots, and emotional openings that made it easy for certain people, environments, and patterns to get in. But you don't belong to that version of yourself anymore. Your growth didn't happen loudly. It happened in the quiet moments where you finally said, "I'm tired," and meant it. It happened when you stopped arguing with people who were committed to misunderstanding you. It happened when you looked at your own life and thought, "I deserve better than this," and actually followed through. It happened in the small decisions, the ones that felt tiny, but were actually tectonic shifts. You didn't escape the storm. You evolved out of its reach. Your energy changed. Your emotional standards changed. The way you carry yourself changed. What you allow, what you entertain, what you respond to, it all shifted. And when you outgrow the identity that attracted a certain type of struggle, the struggle has no choice but to release you. This is why it's done. Not because life gave you mercy, but because you became a person the storm cannot touch anymore. Number 2, the lesson repeated until you transformed, and now the lesson has no more use for you. Life has a sharp way of teaching you what you refuse to learn voluntarily. It doesn't move on just because you're exhausted, fed up, or over it. It moves on when you finally become the person the lesson was trying to shape. That's why certain patterns in your life kept looping. The people, the disappointments, the conflicts, the emotional déjà vu. It wasn't random. It was a curriculum. And you were enrolled whether you wanted to be or not. You weren't stuck because life hated you. You were stuck because a part of you was still responding the same old way. Maybe you kept giving people chances they didn't deserve. Maybe you kept shrinking yourself to be liked. Maybe you kept hoping someone would treat you better instead of treating yourself better. Maybe you kept avoiding the truth because it was uncomfortable. Whatever it was, the universe kept placing you in front of the same theme over and over until something in you finally snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. That clarity is when the real transformation begins. It's when you stop reaching for people who let go of you first. It's when you stop explaining yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. It's when you stop romanticizing potential and start paying attention to consistency. It's when you see your own patterns and hold yourself accountable. The moment you change the way you act, react, choose, and think, the lesson can't continue. It's like a lock finally clicking open. Life doesn't keep testing someone who has already demonstrated mastery. Once you start choosing differently, choosing yourself, choosing your peace, choosing boundaries, choosing truth, the situation automatically dissolves because its job is done. The version of you who tolerated certain pains no longer exists, so the pains themselves lose access. This is why you'll never go through that same cycle again. The lesson served its purpose. It built something in you. It broke something off you. And now that you've upgraded from the inside out, the old pattern simply has nowhere left to land. Number 3. You're not done because the universe is kind. You're done because you finally became a match for your own destiny. It's easy to think that when something ends, when a chapter closes, or when a storm passes, it's because life decided to cut you a break. That's not how it works. You're not done because fate suddenly took pity on you, or because someone finally got it right. You're done because you evolved into the version of yourself that destiny was waiting for. A version strong enough, clear enough, and aware enough to handle what was coming next. The universe doesn't operate on sympathy. It operates on alignment. Everything that once dragged you down, frustrated you, or kept repeating in your life wasn't random. It was the pressure, the resistance, the friction you needed to transform your energy. Destiny waits for people to grow, to rise, to claim their own power. Until then, life keeps sending the same lessons, the same tests, the same energy in slightly different forms. Nothing stops, nothing pauses, because the universe isn't in a rush. It only opens the door when you're ready to walk through it without hesitation, without fear, and without bargaining. Being done isn't about comfort, it's about readiness. It's about reaching a level of self-mastery where old patterns, old toxicity, and old limitations simply have no entrance. When you step into this version of yourself, the same situations that once trapped you now bounce off. The energy that once demanded your attention no longer has a claim on you. Your mind, your heart, and your soul are finally tuned to the frequency that your true path requires. This is why you can feel a quiet power now, the kind of calm that isn't arrogance but absolute certainty. You didn't escape, you didn't evade, and you didn't get lucky. You became someone your destiny respects. And because of that, everything that tried to hold you back has no choice but to step aside. The chapter is closed not because life is merciful, but because you have become the person who was meant to carry what comes next. Number 4. The people who harmed you were not villains. They were catalysts your future self hired to force your evolution. Painful people, toxic situations, and those who betrayed you weren't just obstacles. They were necessary instruments in your growth. The truth is harsh, but liberating. The people who caused the deepest hurt didn't break you. They activated the part of you that had been dormant, the part that was ready to evolve, but hadn't yet been tested. Every insult, every betrayal, every manipulation wasn't punishment. It was fuel, sharpening your resilience, refining your perception, and demanding that you level up in ways comfort never could. These individuals were extreme mirrors, reflecting parts of yourself that needed recognition. They exposed your blind spots, your tolerance for nonsense, and the weaknesses you were pretending didn't exist. Without them, the transformation might have taken years longer, or might not have happened at all. The lesson is brutal. The universe often uses humans, with all their flaws, as tools to force the awakening of the person you were destined to become. This doesn't mean you forgive them. Forgiveness is optional and often overrated in these situations. You don't owe them a thing. The point is to acknowledge that your suffering was not wasted, and that the version of yourself who endured it, who faced fire and refused to be consumed, is the one who finally stepped into mastery. That version of you upgraded your standards, your boundaries, and your self-worth. That version of you refuses to be manipulated, deceived, or controlled. So instead of resentment, there is clarity. Instead of bitterness, there is understanding. You can look back and recognize that the chaos wasn't random cruelty. It was a calculated, if painful, curriculum designed to push you into the version of yourself that can now thrive unhindered. You survived not because they were merciful, but because your future self was ready to emerge from the ashes stronger, sharper, and unshakable. You don't need them anymore. They were catalysts, and their job is done. You emerged, you upgraded, you won. Number 5. What ended wasn't the situation. It was your willingness to abandon yourself to keep the peace. For a long time, you tolerated things that went against your own well-being, simply to avoid conflict, to keep appearances, or to make others comfortable. You bent over backward, swallowed your truth, and silenced your voice, all in the name of harmony. That willingness to compromise yourself was the real chain, not the situation itself. The people, the drama, the toxic patterns, they were just the surface. The true binding force was your own acquiescence. Eventually, something inside you reached a breaking point. You realized that peace at the cost of your authenticity wasn't peace at all. It was surrender. And when you finally refused to sacrifice your integrity for the sake of others, everything built on that foundation of self-betrayal had no choice but to collapse. The arguments, the misunderstandings, the manipulations, the recurring frustrations, they all fell away not because the external forces magically disappeared, but because your internal tolerance ran out. Your boundaries, your energy, your self-respect became impermeable, and nothing that thrived on your compromise could survive. This is why it feels sudden, as if the world shifted overnight. It's not that life suddenly became easier, it's that the version of you that allowed the toxicity is gone. You stopped negotiating with the parts of life that demanded your sacrifice. Your refusal to abandon yourself acted like a detonator, and the structures built on your old compromises imploded immediately. The freedom you feel now isn't accidental. It's the natural consequence of choosing yourself over the need to maintain peace at all costs. The situations that once defined your struggle didn't vanish. They were simply released from the power you had unknowingly given them. Your self-betrayal expired, and with it, everything that depended on it. Now, you are free to exist without compromise. You are free to prioritize your truth, your values, and your peace. That's the real ending. The world didn't change. It's you who changed. And that's what finally made it impossible for the old chaos to continue. Number 6. You were never stuck. You were being detoxed from the environments you thought you needed. For a long time, it felt like life had trapped you. You were surrounded by people, places, and situations that drained you, confused you, or held you back, and it seemed like there was no way out. But the truth is, you weren't stuck. You were being cleansed. Life was removing the toxicity you had mistaken for necessity. Every harsh interaction, every betrayal, every uncomfortable circumstance was part of a detox, a process designed to recalibrate your energy and strip away what was weighing you down. At first, losing what you relied on, whether it was people, routines, or even dreams, feels brutal. It feels unfair. It feels like someone turned off the oxygen while you were still gasping for air. But what you're actually experiencing is the body, mind, and spirit reacting to the removal of anesthesia. The comfort you had leaned on was dulling your perception, masking the damage and numbing your instincts. Once that numbing effect wore off, the discomfort felt sharp, sudden, and cruel. That pain wasn't punishment. It was clarity finally cutting through the fog. Every environment you thought you needed was simply a classroom you outgrew. The people who drained you were mirrors showing what you could no longer tolerate. The situations that frustrated you were signals pointing to where you needed boundaries. And the losses you mourned were actually gains, disguised in temporary grief. They cleared space for your energy to breathe freely, for your clarity to rise, and for your next chapter to be untainted by what no longer served you. You weren't abandoned. You weren't cursed. You weren't powerless. You were detoxing. The feeling of cruelty was just the awakening, like the sting of waking up from a long, misleading dream. And now that the anesthesia is gone, you can finally see, feel, and live in alignment with the reality that was always waiting for you. What once felt like loss is now liberation. Number 7. You outgrew their access, and the universe enforced the boundary you were too drained to set. There comes a point where you don't even argue anymore, not because you're weak, but because you've grown beyond the level where certain people, habits, and energies can reach you. You didn't push them away. You didn't start a war. You simply evolved past the version of yourself that entertained their behavior. That quiet shift in your spirit did more than any confrontation could ever do. You rose, and without realizing it, you made yourself unreachable to those who once had unlimited access. But here's the thing. Growth takes energy. Real growth, the kind that shifts your identity, drains you. And while you were becoming stronger internally, externally, you didn't have the emotional strength left to set every boundary, enforce every limit, or cut off every person who needed to go. You were tired of repeating yourself, tired of explaining what should have been obvious, tired of putting out emotional fires started by other people's immaturity. That exhaustion wasn't weakness. It was the signal. It was the universe stepping in where your depleted energy couldn't. The ending didn't happen because you finally gathered the courage to slam the door. It happened because life closed the door for you. That's what divine intervention looks like. The removal of people who no longer match your vibration, the collapse of situations that can't survive your growth, the sudden distance that appears without warning. You didn't lose anything. You were being protected. What felt like abandonment was actually rescue. What felt like something falling apart was something being corrected. The universe enforced the boundaries your spirit was screaming for, even when your body was too tired to act on it. And now that the dust has settled, you can see the truth. The ending was not a punishment. It was a recalibration, a realignment, a divine cleanup that took place the moment you outgrew the version of yourself who tolerated the bare minimum. Your exhaustion wasn't the end of your strength. It was the beginning of your protection. The universe stepped in because you were ready, even if you didn't feel ready. The ending was necessary, and now you finally understand why. Number 8. Their power over you didn't fade. They simply got exposed to the real you for the first time. For a long time, people seemed to have influence over you. your emotions, your reactions, your decisions, your peace of mind. It looked like they had the upper hand, like they knew exactly how to push your buttons or pull your strings. But the truth is, they never had real power. What they had was access to a version of you that was still dimmed down, still holding back, still trying to be agreeable, patient, or understanding in ways that cost you your own clarity. When your true self finally rose to the surface, your strength, your discernment, your intelligence, your self-respect, the whole dynamic changed instantly. Not because they changed, but because you stopped pretending you didn't see what you saw. You stopped shrinking to make anyone comfortable. You stopped absorbing blame that wasn't yours. You stopped letting emotion override evidence. You stopped letting loyalty blind you to reality. Once the real you appeared, the illusions they depended on shattered. Every tactic that once worked on you, guilt, manipulation, silence, drama, inconsistency, hit a wall. You became immune. Not because you hardened, but because you awakened. The version of you they could influence no longer existed, and the version standing in front of them now was someone they had never met before. And that's what they weren't equipped to handle. They weren't prepared for the you with boundaries. They weren't ready for the you who listens to actions instead of excuses. They weren't ready for the you who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't fold. They weren't ready for the clarity, the intuition, the emotional intelligence, the upgraded energy you now carry effortlessly. So no, their power didn't fade. It was exposed as an illusion the moment you showed up fully. The moment you reclaimed yourself, the entire structure of control collapsed. You didn't overpower them. You simply became someone who could no longer be controlled. They lost access the second you became your true self. And that's why everything changed. Number 9. The suffering didn't stop because it disappeared. It stopped because you stopped negotiating with what was killing you. Pain lingers, not because it wants to, but because we keep giving it permission. For too long, you tolerated situations, people, and patterns that drained you, hurt you, and left you questioning your worth. You tried to reason with them, explain them away, or hope they would change. You bargained with your own peace, trading clarity for temporary relief, hoping the suffering would somehow soften if you just endured a little longer. But it didn't. That's the brutal truth. Tears, compromises, and excuses can't end what's fundamentally toxic. What finally stops the pain is not external, it's internal. It's the moment you stop negotiating with it. The moment you recognize that no amount of pleading, rationalizing, or forcing people and situations to fit your life will save you from what is inherently harmful. That's when clarity arrives, sharp and undeniable. You stop trying to fix what wasn't meant to be fixed. You stop hoping people will honor boundaries they never respected. You stop shrinking yourself for the sake of comfort. Your suffering ends the second you stop allowing it to define you. The tears you shed didn't erase the toxicity, but your clarity did. The decisions you make now, grounded in awareness and self-respect, act as a shield that the old pain cannot penetrate. The patterns that once haunted you lose their grip because you are no longer negotiating with them. You are no longer available for compromise that costs you your energy, your values, and your peace. That's the difference between surviving and evolving. Surviving tolerates, evolving acts, and when you act from clarity, suffering loses its power. It doesn't vanish magically. It becomes irrelevant. It becomes a closed chapter because you finally refuse to play the game on its terms. Your clarity didn't just end the pain, it ended the leverage it had over you. Your tears couldn't do that, but your awareness could. That's how you move from being trapped in cycles of suffering to standing free, unshakable, and unwilling to negotiate with anything less than your truth. Number 10. You were delivered not because you prayed harder, but because you finally aligned with truth instead of illusions. For too long, you may have believed that endurance, hope, or sheer willpower would carry you through the chaos. You prayed, wished, and clung to the idea that things would somehow magically shift. But delivery doesn't come from desperation or persistence alone. It comes from alignment. The moment you stopped bargaining with illusions, excuses, and convenient lies, the cycle began to break. You didn't need luck, miracles, or validation from anyone else. You only needed to face reality with brutal honesty and stand firmly in it. Truth has a way of cutting through confusion like nothing else can. While prayers and wishes may delay the inevitable lessons, the truth accelerates liberation. When you accept what is, instead of what you hope it to be, everything begins to shift. The people, situations, and energies that thrived on your compromises suddenly lose power. The patterns that kept you spinning in circles collapse because they were never compatible with someone willing to see clearly. Aligning with truth means refusing to settle for false comfort. It means recognizing what is toxic and what is unnecessary, even if the truth initially hurts more than the illusion ever did. It means stopping the negotiation with dishonesty, manipulation, and self-deception. Once you make that alignment, the universe has no choice but to respond. It doesn't need your pleading. It doesn't need your tears. It responds to authenticity. That's why your delivery feels sudden, almost surreal. It's not luck. It's not a miracle in the traditional sense. It's the inevitable consequence of finally refusing to live in contradiction with your own reality. When you prioritize truth over illusion, cycles end faster. Doors open wider, and the energy that once trapped you becomes irrelevant. You weren't delivered because you begged harder. You were delivered because you finally stopped lying to yourself. You stopped tolerating what didn't serve you. You stopped pretending. That alignment with truth was all it took, and it will always be stronger, faster, and more permanent than any miracle ever promised to be. Number 11. You're done because the pattern can't survive in an upgraded nervous system. There's a real physical shift that happens when you grow. Your nervous system changes. Not metaphorically, literally. The same cycles that once kept you trapped relied on your old responses: panic, overthinking, guilt, anxiety, people-pleasing, emotional confusion. Those reactions were the fuel that kept the whole pattern alive. But you've outgrown that wiring. You've trained your mind and body through every heartbreak and every moment of clarity to respond differently. And because of that, the pattern simply can't survive in you anymore. You no longer break down at the first sign of tension. You no longer absorb every emotion in the room. You no longer feel responsible for keeping dysfunctional people comfortable. Your nervous system is no longer calibrated for chaos. It's calibrated for clarity. When something is off, your body reacts immediately. When someone's energy is wrong, your intuition speaks louder. When manipulation shows up, your mind spots the inconsistency before the sentence is even finished. That's what an upgrade looks like. Your entire internal system rejecting what it used to tolerate. This is why the things that once trapped you don't even make sense to you now. The anxiety that used to spike is gone. The emotional hooks they used to pull no longer catch anything. The guilt trips fall flat. The drama doesn't move you. You don't chase. You don't engage. You don't collapse under pressure the way you once did. You don't feel compelled to rescue, explain, beg, or hold together what was never your responsibility to begin with. Your spirit, energy, and discernment have become too sharp for old traps to recognize you. You're not the same target. You're not the same emotional landscape. You're not someone who can be disarmed by the tools that once worked on you, and because of that, the pattern falls apart, not gradually, but instantly. You're done not because the situation ended, but because your internal architecture no longer supports the version of you that kept the pattern alive. Your healing rewired you. your clarity recalibrated you, and now anything rooted in your old wounds simply has nowhere left to attach. Number 12. The chapter closed because you stopped seeking closure from the people who wounded you. For too long, you may have believed that peace depended on someone else admitting their mistakes, apologizing, or making things right. You waited, hoped, and even begged for acknowledgement, thinking that without it, the story couldn't end. But the truth is, the chapter only closes when you decide it's over, not when they offer a confession. Waiting for others to validate your pain keeps you trapped in the past. Real closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. Choosing understanding over expectation is the turning point. It's the moment you accept that some people will never act the way they should, that some truths will never be spoken, and that the respect you needed may never arrive from outside. That doesn't make the hurt any less real, but it frees you from being emotionally hostage to their actions. You don't need their apology, their explanation, or their acknowledgement to reclaim your power. You only need the courage to see the situation clearly and decide that your peace matters more than their accountability. When you stop negotiating for closure from those who harmed you, the weight they carried over your life falls away. You stop replaying the past, questioning your choices, or hoping for validation that isn't coming. You stop giving energy to people who don't deserve it and start investing in the parts of your life that actually matter. That's when the chapter truly ends, not with their words, but with your acceptance. This shift is subtle but profound. It transforms bitterness into clarity, pain into perspective, and obsession into freedom. The story doesn't erase the hurt, but it removes the hold that hurt had over you. You finally step out of the cycle of waiting and start moving forward. The chapter closed the moment you decided to stop seeking what was never yours to demand. Understanding replaced expectation, and in that clarity, liberation arrived. You didn't wait for them, you freed yourself. Number 13. You didn't escape the darkness. You extracted the wisdom the darkness was holding hostage. When life pushed you into your lowest moments, it wasn't trying to bury you, it was trying to reveal you. The darkness you went through wasn't just suffering for the sake of suffering. It was carrying something you couldn't have accessed any other way, a level of wisdom, strength, and self-awareness that comfort could never have taught you. You didn't walk out empty-handed. You walked out holding the very lessons that changed the way you see yourself, others, and life as a whole. People often talk about escaping hardship, but escape implies running. You didn't run. You stayed long enough to understand the truth hiding underneath the pain. You stayed long enough to recognize your patterns, confront your fears, strip away illusions, and rebuild your identity from a place of honesty instead of survival. The darkness didn't defeat you. It educated you. It refined your instincts, sharpened your intuition, toughened your heart, and expanded your capacity to see through things that once deceived you. The wisdom you gained came with a cost, and you paid it. Nights of confusion, moments of breaking, days of uncertainty, and stretches of emotional exhaustion. None of that was wasted. Every tear, every setback, every betrayal contributed to a deeper knowing that now guides you with a clarity you never had before. That is why you move differently now. That is why you no longer fall for the same tricks, tolerate the same disrespect, or question your worth the way you once did. The darkness didn't leave you the same. It didn't let you walk out until you had everything you needed to make sure you never returned to that chapter again. That was the price, and you paid it in full. Not with money, but with growth, endurance, and finally choosing yourself. You didn't escape, you evolved. You didn't just survive, you graduated. And the wisdom you carry now is proof that the darkness never had power over you. It was merely holding on to a truth that only your courage could unlock. Number 14. It's done because you finally became the person the pain was trying to build. Pain doesn't exist to punish you. It exists to shape you. Every heartbreak, betrayal, disappointment, and struggle was a blueprint, not a sentence. The universe doesn't waste suffering. It invests it in your evolution. For years, the experiences that hurt the most were not random attacks. They were lessons trying to forge a stronger, wiser, more resilient version of yourself. And now, that version has arrived. You are the person the pain was designed to create. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly, in moments when you choose integrity over convenience, truth over comfort, and self-respect over approval. You absorbed the lessons embedded in the hardship, whether you realized it at the time or not. The confusion, the tears, the sleepless nights, they were all forging clarity, strength, and discernment. And once you internalized what you needed to survive and thrive, the cycle could no longer continue. This is why it's over. The universe does not recycle a lesson for someone who has already mastered it. You cannot go back to the beginning because the foundation has changed. The person you once were, the one who attracted certain pain, tolerated certain patterns, or reacted in predictable ways, is gone. You've evolved beyond the parameters that made the struggle possible. Being done doesn't mean the journey was easy. It means it was effective. The pain was precise, targeting only what was necessary to shape the person you are today. And now that you embody the outcome it intended, there is no reason for repetition. The chapter has closed not by chance, but by design. You became the solution, the mastery, and the end point the universe intended. The lessons have done their work, and their job is complete. You are no longer a student of that pain. You are its graduate. The universe will not send you back because you have already proven you can rise above, and that rise is permanent. Conclusion. Everything you've been through, the betrayal, the pain, the chaos, the confusion, was never random. It was designed to refine you, to push you to the version of yourself that could finally stand unshakable, unbothered, and fully aligned with your truth. You didn't just survive, you transformed. You outgrew patterns that no longer serve you, extracted wisdom from the darkest moments, and built a self that the old struggles can no longer touch. The storms that once consumed you no longer have access, because your energy, clarity, and discernment have upgraded. The people who hurt you were never villains. They were catalysts, forcing the evolution you needed. The lessons repeated not to break you, but to ensure you became the person capable of mastering them. And now, that mastery has arrived. You no longer seek closure from those who failed to give it. You no longer negotiate with what drains you. You've aligned with truth, embraced your growth, and finally claimed the freedom that was waiting for you all along. This is not just the end of a chapter. It's the beginning of a life unbound. You are no longer the person who tolerated chaos. You are the person the universe respects, the storms fear, and the illusions can no longer touch. Your transformation is total, your liberation undeniable, and your journey forward unstoppable. If this message resonated with you, make sure you don't just take it in. Share it. Like this video, comment your thoughts below, and share it with someone who needs to hear this truth. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content that helps you rise, evolve, and become the unstoppable version of yourself. You've done the work, you've paid the price. Now, step fully into the life that's been waiting for you. It's done, and it's yours. Stay awakened, chosen ones.